So good morning or good afternoon. It's nice to have you with us for our November webinar. I'm Julie Broadway, President of the American Horse Council, and we're just delighted to have some really special guests with us today. But first, a little housekeeping. Please be sure to put yourself on mute so we don't have a whole lot of background noise. If you have any questions as we go along, put those in the chat. We have seen a proliferation of artificial intelligence tools being used in our recent recordings and webinars. So we wanted to let you know that you may not use those tools unless you have express permission to do so. We are recording this, and we will make the recording available to you after the event today. So I want to say a special thank you. This webinar is brought to you by the Equine Industry Executive Forum. This is about 30 CEOs and executive directors in the equine industry, and we meet periodically to talk about things that keep us up at night. What are the issues facing the association space, and how do we help each other share best practices and education and all kinds of tools and techniques? And so this topic today was one that they came to me and said, we really want to hear some more about recruiting, retaining, and developing talented staff members. I think we're all undergoing some significant changes. Just over the weekend, I've seen they've chosen a new CEO at the American Quarter Horse Association. So that was a big announcement. We're getting close to finalizing the CEO at Path International. So we've got a lot of movement going on out there right now. And so with that, I really want to introduce you to some new friends of mine from CBiz. And we're going to have Karen and Sam join us this afternoon. And they previewed with me how wide and deep this topic is. So we concluded that we're going to kind of hit the key overview points. And then I'm committed to offering a follow-up webinar if we have more interest in drilling down on some of these subjects. So with that, let me first introduce you to Karen. She brings more than 30 years of experience working in and consulting for nonprofit organizations across the country. She leads a team that helps nonprofits leverage leadership and strategy to grow and sustain their mission impact. Her expertise includes helping nonprofits plan for and thrive through executive leadership transition, leadership planning, and human resources consulting. So with that, Karen, hopefully I've got you all set up and you can take off.
Thank you. Sam and I are delighted to be with you today. I am going to share my screen, and we will also make sure that you all receive a copy of today's PowerPoint. So as Julie said, we're talking about staff recruitment and retention and talent management. And part of our thinking around talent management also involves leadership continuity planning. And we also want to do a light touch on all of this work at the executive CEO level. But we've left that for the end. So if we don't quite get to it, I think we'll be okay. All right. So that's us. So just an overview, when we think about employee recruitment and retention, we're really talking about all of the tools, systems, processes that contribute to effective recruitment and retention. And at a high level, we're thinking about what do organizations need to pay attention to in terms of laws and policies. How do we reflect our organization's culture in our practices and our work? And how do we also understand what's happening in the labor market so we can change our approaches or shift our approaches to better align with what's happening in the marketplace? In terms of talent management, we think about that within the context of business and leadership continuity. So part of that is thinking about the organization being prepared for unplanned or planned departures, so that the organization is aware of what they need to be thinking about and planning for, and how we can use that to contribute to talent management. And then we think about all of these things also as they apply to the CEO or executive director position, and best practices in that space. We come to all of this work using a sustainability framework, which is a process that we developed so that organizations think holistically and strategically around employee recruitment, retention, and talent management, meaning it is more than just the tactics of those areas. It's important to think about how your business model, how your resources, your leadership, and your culture all intersect. So just a light touch on this framework. As you're thinking more strategically about systems and processes that support high-level recruitment, retention, and talent management, it's important to think about those within the context of your strategy or business model. So understanding strategically what's important to the organization, where you are in terms of annual planning and results and metrics that are important to the organization, and how those might tie to different positions on your team. It's certainly important to think about in terms of recruitment and retention. Is it a part of the leadership team, or is it part of your overall staff? And we think about resources, both human capital, financial health, your infrastructure, and then culture. Your values, your work environment, how does your team work? And particularly for different positions, what the decision-making authority might be. So let's dive into employee recruitment. I think some of it depends in terms of employee recruitment on whether you are recruiting because you have a planned departure. So you're recruiting to be a successor for a particular position, whether it's an unexpected departure, or perhaps you're recruiting because you're growing a new line of business or a new area of your team. So thinking about the why for recruiting for a position is incredibly important. And I think the position description is one tool that is important to think strategically around. Think of a position description not as a job description with a laundry list of responsibilities in a job, but think of it as the marketing document. The document that will attract talented professionals. So we always think about position announcements starting with sort of a leading statement. And I think it's helpful to, in that leading statement, describe sort of the value of the position for the organization. The announcement should also, at a very high level, talk about key functions and responsibilities. We have found that it's often helpful, depending on the position, to group responsibilities into key areas. And to ensure that the listing of those responsibilities doesn't look like a laundry list with a final addition of and other responsibilities or duties as assigned. I think it's helpful in the announcement to indicate how this position fits in with your overall structure. It's a member of the development team, or it's a member of our conferences and events team, or it leads our fill in the blank department. I think it's important to think about the knowledge, skills, and attributes that are important for the position. And so differentiating between job experiences that you hope to attract, as well as personal attributes, work style attributes. And I think the final piece to think about in the announcement is credentials. Too often we find organizations make certain credentials for a position a requirement, when in fact it may not actually be required for the position. For example, we've seen a number of organizations that are hiring for a development manager, and they are requiring a bachelor's degree in a particular field, or they're requiring a master's degree. And one of the things we know is that there are very few positions that actually require specific educational degrees or other credentials. I think the second piece to think about in terms of recruitment is the work to be done around compensation and your work environment and how you can be thinking proactively around those. We do encourage organizations to invest in compensation studies that help you understand what the market rate would be for various positions. If you are leading an organization that has a fairly large staff, so a staff of 25 or 50 or 100 or 200, we would recommend that you think about the compensation work in pay bands, where you have grouped positions with similar levels of work requirements and responsibilities. But that will give you a really good understanding of what the cost might be to hire someone new. I think it's important to understand what paid transparency laws are in effect in your jurisdiction. So, for example, I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has a paid transparency law that requires us to list salary ranges for any positions based in our Washington, D.C. office. And I think the third piece to think about is the work environment. And within the work environment, it is thinking both about is this position in person? Is it hybrid? Is it remote? And thinking more about the potential that the position might attract more talent if it has a hybrid or remote component to it. And so, in addition to thinking about the position announcement and how that can be a marketing and effective tool in terms of recruiting talent, I think your outreach strategy also bears some time thinking through. Many organizations simply assume that if you post the job, that they will come, right? But in fact, I think it's important to think through whether or not your organization has a policy around job postings and outreach. For example, we've worked with some organizations where their HR policies require them to post positions internally before they're posted externally. So making sure that you're aligning with any policies that you have within your organization, thinking through what the application process will actually look like. How do people apply and who internally will be reviewing those applications. And then thinking more strategically around both job postings and potential outreach. So certainly if your organization has a career page, that's a number one posting. But I think it's also helpful to think through relevant job boards. Depending on the level of the position, some organizations find themselves sort of inundated with applications from underqualified individuals. We find that to occur, for example, when jobs are posted to Indeed or Monster, some of the larger job boards. So if the position has a particular functionality to it, so let's say the position is around member services, then you might want to post on ASAE, since that's the national job board for associations. Thinking through outreach networks. So let's say the position is a finance position. You might think through some of the nonprofit finance networks in your jurisdiction and ensure you're getting the word out there. And then I think through timing. If you post a position the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, chances are it's not going to get a lot of visibility. So think through the timing of when you post. Other pieces to think through in terms of employee recruitment is your organization's approach to the whole process. In other words, we think it's important that everyone who applies gets a minimum of two communications. One communication acknowledging receipt of their materials, and then a follow-up communication acknowledging that individual's position in the process. So if they are advancing or if they're not going to advance in the process. One of the reasons that I think communications is so important in recruitment is it is possible that you may get interest from someone for a position that you are recruiting for that may not be a fit for that position, but might be a fit for another position in your organization. So if we treat every applicant with a level of respect and communication, that reflects positively on your organization. And if they come back into your orb for another position in the future, that'll be successful for you. I think it's important for your organization to think ahead of time who on the team is going to review materials. What will the selection activities look like? What's the timing on that? What do initial interviews or screenings or final interviews, if there are going to be other activities to help the organization make a decision? And thinking through those activities, not just from your perspective as the employer, but also how those activities and the timing of them and the timeline for that process, how that will land for candidates in your recruiting activity. Certainly, it's important to identify whether there's a hiring manager or a hiring team. And as I said before, the length of process. We certainly have seen some organizations lose talented candidates because of an extended or protracted hiring process. On the HR policy side, certainly your process needs to reflect whatever your HR policies and practices are. So whether or not you do references, whether or not you do background investigations and what is included in those investigations, whether or not you have probationary periods, any benefits parameters that are applicable. So moving from employee recruitment to retention. So one of the pieces that we think about in terms of employee retention is, what are the factors that contribute to that influence that? And these are listed not necessarily in terms of priority, although I will say that it often depends on the employee. Some employees, it's really about the relationship and the feel of the environment, and for some employees, the benefits and other aspects of the job and the work environment are more important. So certainly the relationship with the supervisor, the work-life balance, although I feel like we are coming out of an era where it was the life-work balance, what the relationship is with coworkers across the organization, opportunities to grow and learn, again, the hybrid work environment, clarity of job responsibilities, being able to connect my work with the mission of the organization or how my piece of the puzzle contributes to our overall organization impact. And then other benefits can also influence retention. So when we think about strategies for retaining talent, one of the mechanisms that we encourage organizations to invest in is to do to gather information on your employees' job satisfaction. And that can be done, it can be done either through informal check-ins with a supervisor. It can also be done more formally through an employee survey. If you are going to invest in an employee survey, I would encourage you to make sure that you are thinking through all of the topics and areas that you are asking about, and that you are only including those topics or areas where you might have the ability to make a change or make a difference. So if you ask your employees about how they think of your health insurance package, but you as an organization are not in the position to change that in any way, I probably wouldn't ask about it. So gather the information, think through what the aggregate feedback is, and where you could make some changes that would be responsive to the aggregate feedback. And then think about those changes relative to the feasibility of making them and the affordability of implementing those changes. I also encourage leaders to keep an open mind. Quite often, our thinking about our employees' experience is informed by our own experiences as developing professionals. And I would argue that we developed as professionals in a work environment that's quite different from today's work environment. So keeping an open mind, I think, serves everyone well. Again, I think it's also important not to just sort of do a one and done in terms of understanding what will contribute to job satisfaction and talent retention. I think it's important to be getting feedback on a regular basis, at least annually, if not more frequently, because as we know, our world keeps shifting, and the changes seem to be coming faster in today's world than ever before. So just keeping an eye on the pulse of your organization and your team is helpful. And another opportunity for retaining talent is keeping an open door policy. I think it's important that members of your team know where they can turn if they have an issue. And want to talk about ideas for improving the work experience. So that open door policy is not limited to the CEO. It might be directed also at supervisors, at your HR teams, and so forth. So when we think about talent management, one of the pieces that we know is it is more cost effective to retain talent than to continually be hiring talent. But given that, it is also true that sometimes we lose members of our team for unexpected reasons. And we also know that every member of our team at some point is going to depart the organization. So I think one of the talent management pieces that is important for an organization to think through is what we call business and leadership continuity planning. So part of this enables the organization to be proactive so that you are ready in the event of an unplanned or planned staff departure. It certainly mitigates risk and minimizes that feeling of crisis, particularly if it's a key member of the team that's leaving. But it helps to also look at organizational gaps and potential adequate redundancies in terms of your organization's coverage and expertise, but also looking at the talent that you have on your team and thinking through the opportunities for professional development, either linearly or also cross-matrixed. And finally, I think the value in leadership continuity planning is it makes it creates a space within an organization where thinking through the planning work doesn't trigger an anxiety around, oh, are we doing this because I'm about to be terminated? But it becomes part of the organization's risk management and talent management approach. So one of the building blocks of leadership continuity planning is backup planning, and again, this is a framework that eventually does translate to talent management. So I would encourage organizations to start this work if you have a larger organization with key positions on your team. I also think it's work that can and should be done for every position in your organization. And that's really taking a look at not just the job description, because often we have organizations where the job descriptions are hanging out in a file somewhere, but they're not necessarily referred to on a regular basis. But really thinking through the functions of each position, and thinking through any calendar implications for those major job functions and responsibilities. At the aggregate level, that also gives you the opportunity to be thinking through if you have positions where there are multiple staff in similar positions and the level of overlap with those staff, as well as positions for which only one person has that position, and whether or not that creates any risk if the person suddenly departs. For each of those major functions and responsibilities, thinking through the backups for those functions if the person departs unexpectedly, and then thinking through what are the cross-training components that we can build into this plan so that if there are peers or direct reports or even supervisors that will be taking on a particular job function in the event of an unexpected departure, that those individuals know about it, and if there's any cross-training that needs to occur. When you're thinking about backups for positions, I encourage organizations to think through the advantage of having one person internal to the organization as the backup or shared internal backup, the potential to get interim staffing from an external source, or the possibility that maybe with that unexpected departure, it's time for the organization to consider outsourcing a function. In terms of additional pieces for you to think about in terms of continuity planning, it's important to think about how your organization's calendar impacts the planning work, meaning let's say your organization has a major conference, an annual conference in January of each year. If your events director unexpectedly departs the organization, in November, that can significantly impact your thinking around the backup for that position, given that you've got a major event in less than 2 months. I think it's also important in the event that someone departs unexpectedly, how much time can the organization be okay with that person's departure without engaging the backup plan. I think it's important to think through also communications. How do we talk with our team members about someone's departure? And then how do we let external stakeholders know? So if my finance director unexpectedly departs the organization, I'm going to think through who are the external stakeholders that finance director had significant relationships with on behalf of the organization. And I'm going to think through the timing of communications with those external stakeholders. And that speaks also to other relationships that a particular position might have. The other piece that some organizations don't think about in terms of continuity essentials is documents, records, and systems. I think it's really important for each position to have documents and records in a predictable place, and the right people having access to those files or passwords, so that you minimize any disruption or risk to the organization's operations in the event of an unplanned departure. So we've talked a little bit about the organization calendar. Part of this work obviously helps you understand your internal capacity. I think it's also important to think through, are there any pieces of work for the position that should be suspended until we have the position filled? And how frequently should we be updating these planning documents? So let's think through, oh, that's a double slide. Let's think through how leadership continuity and talent management come together. We encourage leadership continuity planning to be done at least annually, and to include it in annual performance management. So that gives us the opportunity not only to identify members of our team who could take on some of our own responsibilities and job functions if we were absent for an extended time or unexpectedly left, but it also identifies potential members of our team who might be positioned with the right support and growth to step into either my position or another position on my team. It also gives us the opportunity to think about lateral advancement. So sometimes we bring on talent to our teams in a particular group or department or function. And sometimes we learn that talent, while a good fit for that department, has additional skills and expertise and might even contribute more through another group within our team. So thinking through the opportunity for what I call lateral advancement, stepping into other areas. The other advantage to also doing cross-training or exposing particularly newer members of our staff to other areas is it also gives those team members the opportunity to think through all of the work that our association or our organization is doing, and to better see how my piece of the puzzle relates to other areas, as well as potentially thinking through the potential that I might want to advance in another department. In addition to that piece of the work, I think it's important for organizations to be really thoughtful around the organization's perspective on professional development. And just some areas that contribute to professional development and talent management. One, internally, the ability to pair particularly someone who's new to our team with a partner, or and some organizations call them work buddies, so that they are more quickly um, feel a sense of belonging on the team. I think that that contributes both to retention and talent management. The ability to identify mentors within the organization who can help our team members and staff develop. And in some cases, external coaches are a good support for professional development. I think in addition to sort of the individual approach in terms of partners, mentors, and coaches, it's important for organizations to think through learning and development, whether that's internal to the organization or external. And external learning and development also includes not only classes, but the ability to participate in conferences and or continuing education. So we've talked a lot about employee recruitment, retention, continuity planning, talent management, focus largely on our staff and our teams. I wanted to do a high-level touch on how these are also important for the executive director CEO position, but a little bit different. So in terms of CEO leadership continuity, I think this is a must for every organization, meaning that your board of directors understands how the organization will continue to operate in the event of an unplanned extended absence or departure. And a lot of that must be informed by the CEO. Obviously, you have the best perspective on how you are advancing your work. It's also impacted by the strength of your leadership team. We've certainly worked with organizations that only have an executive director, as well as organizations with an executive director or CEO with, large staff. So whether or not you have a leadership team, obviously, is part of that conversation. And I think the third building block in CEO leadership continuity is the role of the board and the executive committee. I think sometimes boards may not understand how they are to approach the possibility that you might suddenly be absent for an extended period of time or depart the organization. So in addition to the organization being ready for an unplanned absence or departure, I think every organization also needs to have a CEO transition plan in place. And that doesn't mean that you're leaving today or tomorrow. It just recognizes that each of us will leave our position at some point. And the organizations that manage that work the best are organizations that take the time ahead of time to develop a CEO transition plan. So it ensures that the organization is ready whenever the transition occurs. It really outlines the board's role and responsibility in that work. And I think the best plans are ones where the CEO and the board are working collaboratively to advance that plan. So I'm just going to do a light touch on these, so we have time for Q&A at the end. Um, so when you're thinking about a strategic CEO succession policy, certainly some of the pieces to be thinking about are what's in your organization's bylaws that may impact that work, where you are in your strategic planning, any major changes to programs or funding or other important aspects of the organization, the potential for concurrent transitions, which could be at the board level as well as at the staff level. Um, uh, Anything happening in terms of regulations, laws, the economy, the external environment that could impact this, and the potential for strategic partnerships. Um, Certainly at the CEO level, we are starting to see a number of planned internal successions as the organizations approach, as well as the traditional executive search. And we also see a number of organizations that are accessing external interim leadership to support a good transition. So I'm going to let you all do a little bit of reading. So thinking through everything we've talked about in terms of employee recruitment, retention, and talent management, both at the staff level and at the CEO level, and thinking through what's currently in place in your organization. Do you think your organization has the capacity to build or strengthen those processes? What's been completed for the executive, and what do you think needs to be done to bring attention to some of this work within your organization? So questions.
Well, thanks, Karen. That was really informative. Most of you know that, as I said at the start, we've got a lot of movement right now in the equine industry amongst the breed and discipline associations and other organizations. So those are all great things to be mindful of as we embark on some of these changes that are occurring. I'd love for anybody to raise their hand or unmute themselves and pose some questions for Karen and Sam. I can honestly say one of the most recent ones that I've been involved with, we went through 2 rounds of search. The first round, the board had agreed that they wanted the position to be physically located at their headquarters. And so we got one pool of candidates there and didn't seem to find the right fit. And when we reopened the search again, they went to more of a remote hybrid model and got a whole different type of candidate for the second round of that search. So I definitely, these environmental factors and things that are going on in the workplace are driving some of the changes that we all are kind of facing when we do this. Hi, Rob, come on, ask your question.
Well, hi, and thank you for all this. This was actually pretty reassuring, so that's a good good thing that we've got a lot of this in place. Um, one of the things that I'm really interested in that we're dealing with right now is bonus structure. Um,
Mm.
and for us, I mean, I'll say before I came to the organization I'm with now, which I've been with for over a decade now. My experience in the nonprofit world was that outside of typical merit pay or competitive, pay increases for the market, as a nonprofit, we didn't really provide bonuses. So, but when I came on staff here, there's an annual bonus, to reward performance. But it's become kind of really a hotly contested topic for our board of governors or our admin and finance committee on whether or not to have them. And I'm just kind of interested in how common or uncommon it is to have bonuses. And I don't know, any other thoughts anybody has on it?
Sure. So, from my experience, it actually depends significantly on what subset of the nonprofit sector you're in. So, for example, I have seen social service organizations do bonuses as not as part of their compensation structure, but as a talent retention mechanism when things were difficult instead of pay increases, right? So it really depends on the part of the nonprofit sector you're in and how it relates to an overall compensation philosophy. So I certainly have seen in associations a bonus structure where the bonus is tied to metrics. And I've seen bonus structures up to 20% of base salary. So I think a bonus structure can absolutely work. I do think you need to think about what level of position will the bonus structure apply to. I've seen some instances where it's only for people at the manager level and above. Um, and I think it's also important to think through how that bonus structure contributes to the overall compensation. Um, I will also say you will find uh, people who are moving into the association space that are coming from other sectors. Maybe they're coming from your area of industry, and that industry doesn't do bonus structures as part of it, and they step into an association role where the bonus structure is in place, and they're often thinking, I'm not comfortable with that because they're not used to it. So there are sort of multiple pieces that impact that.
So, Karen, I want to build off what Rob asked and query whether signing bonuses are still as strong. I know there were some positions, maybe even during the pandemic, where we saw significant signing bonuses, but I'm not sensing that that's holding up so much right now. Or am I wrong?
So certainly during the pandemic, when it was the employees market as opposed to the employers market, and people were switching jobs and getting just bigger salaries and signing bonuses, yes, we saw that a lot. Um, I see signing bonuses more often in nonprofits. One, where the incoming senior staff person or CEO um, wants to be at a salary level that's higher than what the organization had set for the position. And so they structure the offering the salary at the top of the range that they had budgeted for, and then a signing bonus, and give the executive, a year.
Mhm.
Not that they're hiring them only for a year, but as part of their first year requirement is if you want your annual salary to be at that higher level, then this is the work that has to be done for the
Mhm.
organization to be able to afford that. I have also certainly seen signing bonuses if relocation is involved. Because right now with the Tax Act of 20, I think it was 2017, if you are relocating for a job, you can't deduct that from and you're getting paid for that, you can't deduct it from your taxes. It's just received as income. So I certainly have seen signing bonuses there. But in general, I am seeing it not occur as frequently in today's market as it was in 2022.
That makes sense to me. Roxanne, did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna add on to Rob's question, just as, a fellow executive and what we've done very recently with some bonus things. We had a particularly difficult year last year as we were transitioning into new data systems. And at the end of that year, where everybody was just kind of had been way overworked and kind of felt a little beat up from the whole process, we did an end of the year bonuses and kind of scaled it based on how involved people were with having to deal with these new systems. So that was sort of a fun, creative way to go back and thank the people who really had worked the hardest on that. And then additionally, we had done a compensation study, which told us some things we needed to shift around and do better in some of the payment structures. And because we're in a little flux with all this data stuff, we felt uncomfortable saying, oh, we're going to just jump everybody to this different levels of increase. So what we decided to do was do our standard increase, but the goal is once we see where we end this year to then go back and do bonuses again. So kind of trying that out last year became something that our board now kind of likes and wants to maybe lean into maybe more than they should as far as compensation benefits there.
Anybody else questions for Karen?
So I was gonna offer one other piece that I've been seeing recently with some organizations that are looking at employee benefits, but are not in the position to be able to grow salaries. They're looking at reduced work weeks at the same salary. And also looking at it as a way to perhaps make their teams more efficient. So getting the work done in a 35-hour work week, as opposed to a 40-hour work week, but at the 40-hour work week pay level.
That's pretty creative. I hadn't thought about that approach, but it makes sense. Okay.
It's a way of, again, thinking about different retention strategies that don't cost more money.
I'm involved with another nonprofit, and one of the things that they tried was offering what they call an in-service day. So it's not really a vacation day, and it's not really PTO, but they're offering this one day to go and do some kind of community involvement. So it's very rewarding for the employees. They get engaged in the local community, and it turned out to be a big plus for the staff. It was like, hey, this is great. So there's lots and lots of different models out there, I think, that are kind of interesting to consider, especially based on your work culture, but you kind of have to figure out. That's the main thing.
That's right.
Anybody else have a question for Karen? We're getting to the top of the hour, and I want to be mindful of your time. Like I said, we have recorded this. And if you like this subject and you want to learn more, Karen has graciously offered to come back and do part 2 of this presentation. And I really want you to check out CBiz. They're a really well-rounded firm that offers a lot of different services. She's talked a lot about talent recruitment and retention and succession planning and all those things. But they do a number of other strategic planning and all these other things. There they are. There's their slide.
So these are all the services that we offer to the nonprofit industry. So we have a whole nonprofit vertical within the firm, and our work falls under the human capital piece. But this will be at the end of the PowerPoint. So we would love, if we can be of service to any of you through any of our services, we are delighted to explore that with you.
Great. Well, thank you, Karen, and thank you everyone for attending. Feel free to reach out to me if you've got some follow-up questions, and I can funnel those to Karen and make introductions if necessary. And let me know if you would like to continue this conversation, or if there is another need you have that you'd like for us to explore a guest speaker regarding, we'd be happy to do that too. Most recently, we've done a series on volunteer recruitment and engagement, and a number of different things that I think all of us in the space, all struggle with from time to time. So check those out on our website. So thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.